The entire financial system is in trouble, and the recent spike in the silver price has exposed it all. In the West, silver is treated as something you move around on a screen, but not something that actually matters. But it does matter, given that it's going to be required more and more as we create a world deeply integrated with AI, robotics, and other advanced technologies. And China understands that, even if no one else does. Unlike gold, which is primarily used as a store of wealth, silver's value is driven primarily by industrial use. Treating it first and foremost as a paper asset only works in a world where everyone gets along and everything is smooth, globalized, and stable. But that world did exist, and it was awesome, but it's dead now, and we have to accept that and adapt accordingly. The price of silver used to be set by traders, but now China is showing that the future price is going to be set by those who use and control the physical flow of silver. This is a massive paradigm shift that points towards something far bigger than the price of silver, which I'm going to explain shortly, but for it all to make sense, we have to build the argument one brick at a time. First, you have to understand that the world order is changing rapidly, and if you fail to update your investing strategy accordingly, you are going to get run over. When inflation and stagnant wages force you to invest rather than save your money, you've got to constantly assess changing macro conditions, and the fact that everyone got caught off guard by the silver move shows that there's one massive macro factor that people are blind to. The stable global order that allowed the world to think of investing and economics in terms of financial instruments instead of manufacturing and use cases is beginning to unwind, and it's putting the dollar at risk. That's why both Dalio and Buffett are sounding the alarm as loudly as they can about America and the state of the dollar. Let's go through it. Here is the uncomfortable question everyone needs to ask, but is largely being ignored. As the economic battle between the US and China reaches a fever pitch over the next few years, how stable is the dollar status as the world's reserve currency? What just happened to silver provides insights into that fundamental question. Here are the facts. On January 1st of 2026, China officially put a new export control regime on silver into effect, requiring government licenses for most shipments out of the country, effectively putting state control over roughly 60 to 70% of the entire world's refined silver supply. And restricting exports to a small list of approved firms puts everyone in their grip. This sharpened export squeeze collided with an already persistent physical supply deficit, driving silver prices to record highs, approaching nearly $100 per ounce, and igniting volatility because the metal is both a critical industrial input and is now treated as a strategic resource by China. To understand why the silver market is currently in a state of shock, you have to look at the massive disconnect between what people trade on their screens and what actually exists in the real world. For decades, we've treated silver as a financial abstraction, a line on a chart used to hedge against inflation or speculate on price swings. You have to understand this mentality. This led to a level of paper leverage that is almost impossible to wrap your head around and is indicative of how the entire West approaches investing itself. As of early January 2026, the paper to physical silver ratio exploded to an estimated 356 to 1. That means for every 1 single ounce of physical silver sitting in a vault in London or New York, there are 356 paper claims, futures, options, ETFs claiming ownership on that same ounce. That's insane. How did it happen? People hate it when I say this, but the stock market is really just a sophisticated casino that allows people to bet on things of value, because traders stopped thinking about most things, including silver, as an actual physical asset that is used for something tangible and instead just started treating the entire world as a purely digital asset. The market got way out over its skis. In a stable, globalized world, this worked. Most traders never actually want the metal. They just want to settle their bets in cash. Banks and exchanges realized they could sell far more paper silver than they actually held because everyone assumed the supply was guaranteed and the global order was stable. Ever heard of a bank run? This is the trader equivalent. No one cares what your bank does with your money as long as it's there for you when you need it. So banks lend out way more money than they actually have. It's called fractional reserve banking. And usually it's fine. Most people don't want their money in any one given moment. They want it in the bank earning interest. But in those rare moments, when everyone wants their money at the same time, banks collapse and the perpetual Ponzi scheme is exposed. What just happened with silver is kind of like a bank run. By locking the supply down, China exposed the illusion of silver's guaranteed supply. And now, to paraphrase Buffett, the tide has gone out and we can see that basically everyone is skinny dipping all the time. When China restricted 60 to 70% of the world's refined silver exports, they didn't just create a new method of price discovery, they broke the confidence of the entire silver paper market. If even 1% of those 356 paper owners suddenly decided they actually need the physical metal for their semiconductor factories or solar plants, the entire exchange collapses. There isn't enough silver in the world. There isn't enough silver in the world to satisfy those paper claims. This is why you're seeing the price scream towards $100. It's the sound of the paper market realizing it is holding a bag of ghosts while China holds the actual metal. This brings us back to our central question, the staggering vulnerability of the US dollar. How bad is it? The silver crisis has revealed a fundamental flaw in the entire American strategy. We act like the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency is a law of nature, when in fact, it is an increasingly fragile system based solely on trust. Just as the West treated silver as a paper asset that represented a real-world asset that would always be available and got insanely overextended via a ratio of 356 paper claims to every actual ounce of physical silver, the US treats the dollar like its status as the world's reserve currency is a permanent guarantee and has gotten itself insanely overextended via debt. When one move by the Chinese highlights that paper backed by nothing is nothing, imagine what happens to the dollar over time as the illusion of paper bets as safe bets permanently vanishes. The dollar is the ultimate paper asset with zero physical backing. It's not backed by anything other than the US government says it's valuable. In no uncertain terms, it is a confidence game. As long as people believe that America will continue to be the most dominant military and economy on planet Earth, you can tax the world via inflation because they're all going to hold those dollars. But if people realize that America is on shaky economic ground and at $38.5 trillion in debt, it is certainly that, people will increasingly look for alternatives. And that's why the percentage of global commerce settled in dollars has dropped from over 70% in the late 1990s to the high 50s today. Confidence is America's primary export, but that confidence is waning. We print pieces of paper that we call dollars, and in exchange, the rest of the world gives us things like their oil, their electronics, and their silver. But that only works as long as the world believes those pieces of paper will hold their value compared to the actual underlying asset. That confidence has been under direct attack by China for a while now, and it's starting to work. China is forcing a global pivot away from Western financial abstractions and back towards physical reality. If that forces the world to update their mental model away from paper assets as safe assets and into an obsession with what the paper asset is actually tied to, it will hasten the decline of the dollar. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is going to happen. Right now, the US is already hyper leveraged carrying the aforementioned $38.5 trillion, and that's just in national debt. It's not to mention corporate and personal debt, which are gigantic in their own rights. That debt forces America to tax the world via inflation, aka money printing. Silver and the crazy price moves that we just saw show how quickly things can move when people update their mental models away from financialization to actual reality. Remember, we live in a physical world where electrons still rule the day. This is exactly why Ray Dalio is warning about financial heart attacks and why Warren Buffett has retreated to a record $380 billion in his cash pile. They see the end of the paper era and the return of pure power politics. We'll get back to the show in just a second, but first, if you rely on caffeine to get through your day, I want you to listen up. The problem with caffeine and stimulants in general is they give you a spike, then you crash hard. I have lived that cycle. That's why I'm a fan of Ketone IQ. Ketones are your brain's most efficient energy source. They cross the blood-brain barrier and power your neurons directly. I take half a dose and it keeps me alert and focused for hours. I use these when I'm writing my deep dives very frequently. Ketone IQ was developed through a $6 million Department of Defense contract to support elite cognitive performance. And keto, going into ketosis, changed my life a little over a decade ago. If you're done with the crash and ready for focus that actually lasts, visit ketone.com/impact for 30% off your subscription order, or visit your local Target and get your first shot free. And now let's get back to the show. We will get right back to the show in a second, but first let's talk about the tracking system built into your phone that you can't turn off. Every SIM card has a permanent ID. It's called an IMSI. Your carrier assigns it once and it never changes. That ID follows you everywhere. Your carrier tracks it, advertisers track it, bad actors track it. VPNs can't hide it, and encrypted apps can't change it. CAPE solves this with identifier rotation. Your SIM ID automatically changes every 24 hours. Same phone number, new identity every single day, making you untraceable. But CAPE doesn't stop there. Your phone number itself is protected by a 24-word cryptographic phrase. Your voicemail is encrypted. Your payment data is tokenized. And CAPE's enhanced signaling protection blocks suspicious network connections before attacks happen. Head to cape.co/impact and use code IMPACT to get 33% off your first 6 months with CAPE. And now, let's get back to the show. Silver has another property that parallels America's need for money printing. Its demand is shockingly inelastic in the short term. When silver prices spike, factories don't shut down. They don't say, well, I guess we'll just stop making solar panels or semiconductors, medical equipment, or power electronics. What they say instead is, we're going to pay more to keep the wheels turning. Because for most of the technologies that matter, silver isn't a nice to have, it is a functional requirement. You can't substitute it away quickly. And in many cases, you can't substitute it at all without redesigning entire systems. That means price does not ration demand the way people intuitively expect. Shortages don't destroy demand. They transfer pain from consumers to corporate margins. And that's exactly the kind of setup that breaks paper markets when physical supply gets tight. Now, here's where it gets even more dangerous. Most people assume that if silver prices rise, miners will simply produce more silver. But that assumption is wrong. Roughly 70 to 75% of all silver produced globally is not mined for the silver itself. Silver is a byproduct. It's pulled out of the ground incidentally while mining other metals like copper, lead, zinc, and gold. That means the silver supply does not respond cleanly to silver prices. If copper demand is weak, copper miners don't ramp production just because silver is expensive. If zinc or lead projects get delayed, silver supply stalls out right along with them, regardless of silver's price. Now, look at US debt through that same lens. Even if the appetite for US debt goes down and people no longer want to buy it, which the US requires to keep making the interest payments on the debt it has already accumulated, Yes, that is more Ponzi-nomics, but it's nonetheless true. And that doesn't mean that the US can just stop making interest payments. Those are going to continue. They are inelastic. And therefore, the US's need to print money will be inelastic if it can't find buyers for its debt. Doesn't matter. They have to keep paying. And anyone paying attention to silver and the slow death of the paper era know that and will seek alternatives, once again hastening the demise of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Because if you hold an asset that's being inflated through money printing, its value is guaranteed to go down. It just becomes a question of how fast. People mistakenly assume that because the US prints the world's reserve currency, that we have an infinite get-out-of-jail-free card. The logic goes something like, if demand for our debt dries up, we'll just print more money to cover the shortfall. But in reality, while printing money might bridge the gap in the short term, it makes people flee the dollar that much faster. This is known as the death spiral of confidence. When you print money to pay for your debt, you're effectively diluting the value of every dollar already in existence. And investors aren't stupid. As soon as they see the Fed is essentially the only buyer of US Treasuries, they realize the safe haven isn't safe anymore. They will then sell their holdings, which forces interest rates to go higher to attract new buyers, and those higher rates then make the interest payments on the already staggering national debt even more impossible to pay. This forces the government then to, you guessed it, print even more money just to keep the lights on, fueling a cycle where more and more dollars are chasing the same amount of goods. And that drives prices up and is exactly how you move from transitory inflation to the kind of runaway double-digit hyperinflation that all throughout history has collapsed empire after empire. Just like with silver, you cannot solve a physical supply problem with a paper solution. Eventually, the math catches up, and it happens with a level of violence that always catches the paper traders completely off guard. Now, if you're tempted to think I'm overstating the problem, consider this. China is already aggressively building alternatives to the US monetary system for this reason and others. The ECNY, or the digital yuan, is the world's first fully operational central bank digital currency. And the CIPS payment system that it uses is set to work around the US financial system entirely. They have already processed over 700 trillion CNY in transactions, creating a lane for global trade that doesn't require a single greenback. If the world starts to believe that US paper claims, whether they are silver contracts or dollars, cannot be converted into real value under stress, the confidence game ends. As Ray Dalio has warned, when debt becomes unsustainable and rivals offer an alternative, they move away from it quietly, but systematically and forever. And it's already happening in the US and is likely to accelerate. So, how do you navigate a world where the paper abstractions are melting and physical reality is taking back control of the wheel? You have to develop an anti-fragile strategy that does not have a single point of failure. Most people are currently very fragile because their entire net worth is tied to the continued stability of the US dollar and the paper markets. Given the current breakdown of the global world order, this creates a massive vulnerability and explains why both the oracle, Buffett, and the architect, Ray Dalio, are modeling new investment strategies that converge on the same point. America and the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency is in trouble. Warren Buffett recently retired as CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, as I'm sure most of you know. He handed the keys to Greg Abel at the start of 26, but before he did that, he made a move that should be a wake-up call for a lot of people. He retreated out of the markets to a record $381 billion cash pile. He spent the last several quarters aggressively selling off foundational American assets like Apple and Bank of America. Why? Because Buffett knows there's trouble in paradise and there's just way too much unpredictability building up in the system. When valuations are stretched the way they are in the market now, and the global order is shifting as rapidly as it is right now, he prefers to maintain optionality. In Buffett's view, having liquid cash during a crisis isn't just safety, It's a weapon that allows you to be, quote unquote, greedy when others are fearful. By being liquid, he doesn't have to predict the future. He can simply react to whatever happens when historically strong bets go on sale. And that's going to happen because everyone else is going to get caught off guard and they're going to panic or go broke from margin calls, bad debt, and or horrible gambles on a market they no longer understand. Ray Dalio, meanwhile, has been studying the last 500 years of the rise and fall of empires, and he spent an insane amount of time personally in China over the last 30 or 40 years. He has seen China's strategies up close, and he knows exactly what they're capable of. And his assessment of the current state of affairs in the US is that we're on the brink of crossing from stage 5 of the big debt cycle, which is marked by the overaccumulation of debt and populist infighting, and moving into stage 6, which is war and total collapse. He has explicitly warned of a potential financial heart attack hitting in or around 2026 as the interest payments on our $38.5 trillion in debt just swallow the entire US budget. His mental model for dealing with all of this is what he calls the all-weather portfolio. He doesn't advise people try to predict exactly when the dollar will fail. Instead, what he says is to build a portfolio that is balanced to thrive whether the economy is growing, in a recession, experiencing high inflation, is dealing with outright war, or just plain catches you off guard. This means holding a highly diverse and uncorrelated mix of shares, gold, and commodities, which are assets that are not someone else's liability. So, if you're going to put all this together and start taking a similar first principles model from these two legends, the path forward is going to look something like this. Step 1, accept that the post-World War II liberal world order, the paper era as I'm calling it, is dead, or at a minimum dying very fast. Cancel your membership to WEF. Start thinking of the world through the lens of great power politics. There is no more holding hands in kumbaya. This is the big boys going to battle with each other in cyber warfare, economic warfare. Please don't ever let it spill to kinetic, but we certainly have to build up and prepare for it. Understand that the physical world matters a lot, especially as we gear up for potential kinetic conflict, and that our days of 356 to 1 paper claims to the actual underlying asset, those days are over. Not just for silver, for everything. Step 2, don't pull out of the market in a panic, but recognize, despite the instability and impossibility of predicting, you can't just save your way to prosperity. In a world locked in fiscal dominance, which we are, where the debt drives monetary policy, and you know there's going to be money printing, cash in a savings account is not a safe haven. It is a melting ice cube. Every day you hold on to it, you are losing purchasing power to the invisible tax of inflation. Now, you need enough cash for, call it 6 to 12 months of survival, enough to remain emotionally sober in the markets. But everything beyond that is exposure to a system designed to devalue your labor. Step 3, shift from financial instruments to productive assets. You want to own things that have pricing power, businesses or resources like silver that people have to buy no matter how high the price goes. In a physical world, the factories don't stop because the price of silver hits $100. They just pay the premium. Owning the functional requirements of the future is one of the best ways to ensure your wealth moves with or ahead of the rate of money printing. Step 4, diversify across economic forces. True diversification isn't owning 10 different tech stocks. That's just 10 different ways to bet on the same paper outcome. It's owning assets that react differently to the same stress. When the dollar is under attack, you want exposure also to hard money and physical commodities, assets that are not someone else's liability. You need a portfolio that can breathe when the credit markets are suffocating. Step 5, don't try to predict the future. Preserve your optionality. You need to be invested. In a world of inflation, that's a non-negotiable. But consider the duration, liquidity, and counterparty risk. The future is guaranteed to surprise us all in some pleasant and deeply unpleasant ways. Understand the macro and throw your punches only when opportunities present themselves. The goal isn't to win an individual trade. The goal is to survive the disorder that is increasingly coming so that you are in a position to thrive when the new order emerges. China has updated its mental model. Buffett and Dalio have constantly updated theirs. If you're still clinging to the paper era rules, you're making yourself the most fragile person in the room. In every moment of disruption like this, there's tremendous opportunity. Just make sure you're poised to capitalize on it. All right, if you want to see me explore more topics like this that have direct impact on your life, make sure that you subscribe right now. All right, my friends, until the next one, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. If you think Trump's shift from being the peace president to the smash and grab president is just random chaos, you do not understand the moment we are living in. This moment is an